This podcast is brought to you by Tri-County Speaks, serving survivors of sexual assault in Berkeley, Charleston, and Dorchester counties.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ariana Keels. I'm the Charleston County Victim Advocate for Tri-County Speaks, which serves Charleston, Dorchester, and Berkeley counties in South Carolina. Today, we're going to be talking about victim blaming, and to talk about this discussion today and guide it with me, I have Bradley Burris, Brittany Green, and Kristen Robinson. Will you guys please tell me a little bit about what you do and let the listeners know what your roles are within our agency, starting with Bradley.
Okay, yeah, so my name is Bradley Burris. My pronouns are they, them, she, hers, and I'm the Prevention Education Coordinator. So just going out in the community, doing any type of preventative efforts, doing trainings and workshops, anything that we can do to educate the community on sexual violence.
Brittany, you're up.
Hey everyone, my name is Brittany Green and I am the Berkeley County Victim Service Advocate for Tri-County Speaks. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And what I do as an advocate is, it looks like being on the hotline, our 24/7 hotline. I do provide case management and resources for individuals that request it through our services. I also help with support groups and make referrals to the community as well as to our own programs in Tri-County Speaks.
And we have Kristen, you're up next. What do you do? What's your role?
Hello. My name is Kristen Robinson. I am the Victim Support Services Coordinator. At this time, I work with the volunteers, getting them in, getting them trained in order to work with our hotline 24/7.
And if you'd like to learn any more about our agency and the things we do, we'll also link our website below. And if you're interested in becoming a volunteer after hearing a little bit about what we talk about today, we'll also provide that information in whatever platform you're listening to this to. So now the introductions are out of the way, we're going to just jump right into it. What is victim blaming, right? So I have a nice legal definition. Hopefully it's not too boring, but we want to give you a good solid base going into this. So the definition I have in front of me is victim blaming is a devaluing act where the victim of a violent crime, an accident, or any type of abusive maltreatment is held wholly or partially responsible for the wrongful conduct committed against them. Victim blaming can appear in the form of negative social reactions from legal, medical, or mental health professionals, as well as the media and immediate family members or other acquaintances. So traditionally, victim blaming has emerged as racist and sexist forms. And the reason for victim blaming can be attributed to the misconception about victims, perpetrators, and the nature of violent acts. So that was a lot of words, but I do want to break that down a little bit and see what my other panelists have to say. So when you think of victim blaming, what comes to mind? What's your definition? Let's start with Kristen.
Mine would be insinuating or making the victim instead of the offender responsible for their own assault.
Okay. Brittany or Bradley, you guys line up with that. How do you break that down? What is victim blaming to you?
You go ahead, Brittany.
Okay. So I agree with both the legal definition and Kristen's definition. It's any time that we are putting the onus or responsibility for a crime or an assault or abuse on the victim instead of putting it on the perpetrator. So a lot of times we look at it as, if this person wasn't in this position, if they didn't put themselves in this position, or if they weren't in a situation that was risky, then this wouldn't have happened to them, when that's the opposite of what is true.
Yeah, I completely agree with, of course, everything that was said. Another way to say it is marginalizing the victim and minimizing the crime. That's what we do. We push the victims to the sides of our minds, into society, and just take away from the real issue, which is that someone decided to exert power and control over another person.
Yep. And I know the definition I gave is pretty broad. It talks about all, victims of all types of crimes, accidents, and, abusive maltreatment, quoting the definition again. But, we work at a rape crisis center, so I really want to look directly and specifically at, victim blaming when it comes to sexual assault. And, through my research and, working in this job, rape culture has come up a lot, right? And
Yes.
so rape culture pretty generally is, if you break down the words rape and culture, it's a culture of rape and how it affects our society and how it's kind of ingrained in our society a little bit, you know. When you think about that, it's like those common phrases of when someone says they were sexually assaulted, it's like, what were you wearing? What did you say to him? If it's a male female situation, it could be, you know, male male, female female, other genders, however people identify. So remember, you know, anyone can be sexually assaulted, but rape culture, I think, is really deeply rooted into the victim blaming when it comes to sexual assault. We don't want to give you too much about rape culture. We would definitely want to encourage that discussion for maybe another video or podcast, but definitely want to, you know, throw in those hot button words, make you think, right? So what are some common examples of victim blaming that we've seen or that, you know, we've experienced in our lifetime? What's one that you can think of, Britt or Brad?
Brittany,
I was going to say, I think the biggest one, or the most common one that we think about is with short dresses. I mean, that's like one of the first things that everybody always thinks about, or at least that I think about, especially growing up here in the South. If you dress a certain way, you just kind of have to expect people to look at you and touch you and talk to you in a certain manner. Another one could be like, well, why were you drinking? Or why did you let your, you know, drink sit on that table? You knew somebody could have put something into it. You shouldn't have put yourself in that situation.
Yeah, I would agree with Brittany. Whenever there's that you statement, like if you are questioning any victim of any crime and you have you in it, that's wrong. Like, go ahead, go back. Don't ever do that. It should be, why did they do this? Not what did you do?
Right.
Another one could be that I've seen, or when a female or someone, not just a female, anyone, is maybe at a party and they're dancing a certain way. People consider them to be suggestive or inviting when that's none of the sort. If they didn't give you permission, the answer is no. I know from personal experience, law enforcement, they do play a big role sometimes when it comes down to victim blaming. I've seen it myself. I went in to report my assault, and I was asked, well, why did you do this? Why did you do that? Why did you go there? This, that, and the fourth. And so, not to go into details too much, but I was 10 at the time, and the person was 26. So if you look at it in that context, those questions should not have been aimed towards me at any point in time. So that was really tough. And so I went in feeling very hopeful, and I left out very furious, and spirit kind of diminished.
And thank you so much for sharing that with us, Kristen, and our listeners. I definitely want to say, I believe you. You know, I wasn't there. I don't know who said it, but if you're brave enough to tell us that something happened to you, then we should be strong enough, brave enough, and honest with ourselves to believe that you wouldn't lie about that. That's not something that I think anybody would lie about. And I know that's another thing when it comes to victim blaming, thinking about rape culture a little bit too, is the bolstering of this idea that so many people lie about sexual assault. Why would someone lie about this? I mean, we all have worked the hotline at some point, working with this agency and knowing just what a safe exam is, a sexual assault forensic exam entails. We have another video on that. Check it out. Shameless plug in there. But those examinations are extensive. They're very personal. They're all in your face. They're, you know, very, you know, physical in nature because it's an exam, a physical exam. They ask you a lot of intimate details about things that go on in your life and a little bit of your background. Why, in theory, would anybody go through all of that, experience all of that, and not be telling the truth? I want to debunk that right here, right now.
Right. 100%.
I have some other examples that I think that we could all definitely say that we've at least heard or experienced once working at Tri-County S.P.E.A.K.S. So married people can't be assaulted, right? Because they're married. There's no such thing. That is wrong. I don't know when the law actually got overturned before where they didn't recognize marital rape, but if you're married, you can still be sexually assaulted. The one that says that men want sex, so there's no way that could be raped. Men want, like, especially when we talk about instances of like someone in position of power, like a teacher, and there's a young kid, right? We're like, oh, like that must have been such a cool thing or a great experience. Wrong. Like that's victim blaming once again, acting as if somebody would want to engage in that just because of their gender. When a case is dropped, just because a case is dropped does not mean that it didn't happen or that somebody was making it up. I know that Kristen, you kind of talked about this with law enforcement, but there's many reasons why a case could be dropped. Why a statement is retracted does not mean that it didn't happen or that you should blame a victim. And then the last one is someone who's in sex work. I mean, I know that we've definitely seen this before where if someone is in that type of profession, people think that sexual assault is just something that is a part of the job or comes with the nature of the work, and that is not true.
Right.
Do y'all have any thoughts on those? Have you seen them before?
I was going to say, I definitely, when it comes to sex work specifically, just because a person, receives payment for sex, that's sex that they're consenting to. Just because you have money and you're willing to give it to the sex worker doesn't mean they have to take the money or give you any type of sexual favors, do any kind of sexual acts. It's consensual sex for a reason, because you want it, you're saying yes enthusiastically, and anything other than that is sexual assault in my book.
Right. And consent is specific. You might consent to, one facet of a sexual experience and not to another one. And so if something else does come into play and that conversation hasn't been had and there isn't, and there isn't that enthusiastic, emphatic yes, then that's, that can be seen as sexual assault. I think the other one, Bradley, that you mentioned that I think is really, really huge, not to get too much into, what's going on in the news with sexual assault right now, but the whole argument that everyone thinks the case was dropped, they must be innocent. And as you said, there are so many reasons why cases get dropped. Victim blaming is a huge proponent as to why people might retract their statement, because if people are blaming them for what happened to them in their assault, how in the world, if the law enforcement, if the solicitor, if their family, if their friends, if the world that knows about this is blaming them for what happened, how in the world are they going to go and deal with a trial with a jury? Because that's a whole different type of re-traumatization that can happen there. And so I think it is really important that we recognize and understand that there are multiple reasons for a case being dropped and someone retracting their statement or deciding, sorry, I'm not going to do this. And so I really think it's important that you mention that. So I like that one.
And I'll even say just another little legal piece dropping in there from, working here is that, like, when it comes to crimes, especially in different states, the elements, that's what they call them, the elements or factors of what happened have to look a certain way. So if the prosecutor or solicitor in South Carolina, that's what we call them, can't meet those elements, then they don't see that case can be, can go through the court. We like to say in the US, innocent until proven guilty, but you have to prove that the person is guilty in a court of law. That doesn't mean that the truth isn't true, right? Just because it can be shown or evidence doesn't match up doesn't mean something didn't happen. So innocent in court doesn't mean innocent in the real world, like Brittany said.
And to pinpoint off what you were saying, I totally agree 100%. And even though my experience was from childhood, one thing that always stuck out from my experience was that a lot of those cases, they end up in either plea deals or how you said the case may be dropped because it is very hard to prove that those things happen. So just like Ariana was saying, just because you end up innocent in court and things like that does not mean that you're innocent in reality. or somebody may have taken a plea deal because, in all honesty, there's not enough evidence. And so therefore the perpetrator may just say, I'm gonna just go ahead and agree, this, that, and the fourth, and you get some time, which is honestly little to nothing. How it's set up for the victims, you really don't get that much justice, but that's what it is. So I did pull up something I looked up a while ago, and what Brittany was saying, it says no means no. And then there are some other ways that you can also say no. So it says no means no, but so does I'm uncomfortable, maybe another time, I don't want to, this doesn't feel right, I don't feel like it, this feels wrong, I'd rather A, B, C, or D. Maybe we should wait, I'm unsure, I don't want to do this anymore, I don't think so, I want to leave, not right now, stop. If it's not a solid yes, then that means it's a no. You know, that's it. If it's not a solid yes, it's just a no. Some people, they don't know how to say no. They don't have the capacity to. Some people are people pleasers. And so they may try to say no in other ways. And like I said, if it's not a solid yes, that means walk away.
Full stop immediately. And I thank you so much, Kristen, for bringing those examples to us. And that kind of ties into the next point. You know, we've talked about what victim blaming is to us and legally, some examples. So now I really want to talk about what are some things that we can do or that we do as an agency or as individuals to really prevent victim blaming. For me, I'm going to start off by saying believing people that tell me they were victimized. If someone tells me this happened, I'm not going to ask why, what, who, how. Just first start off by saying, one, thank you for telling me that, and I believe you. Because even just to say the words out loud, for a lot of people, that makes it more real than what they had in their head, right? And just being able to say it out loud to someone that you hopefully trust in that moment with that information is a lot, and it means a lot. And if someone's trusting you so deeply to tell you something horrible that happened to them and then you're questioning them, it can be diminishing and it can affect people.
Yeah, I think that questioning piece is super important, Ariana, because when people, you know, disclose the information that they were assaulted to someone, and that person may not know what to do, and their only thought is, I have to ask questions. I need to know how this happened. And that needs to take a step back when someone discloses something to you, especially when it comes to issues of abuse and sexual assault, of just being able to say, I'm here with you. Thank you for talking to me about this. How can I help you? Instead of going right into, well, what were you doing? Or where were you? Oh, well, maybe you shouldn't have done that. And I think a lot of people, I mean, there's a lot with victim blaming as far as why it happens, but I think a lot of people are trying to make sense of something that does not make sense. And that's your personal dialogue that goes on in your head, but that's not what the victim needs. That's not what that person needs in that moment. Right there, they need you to be there, whatever they need. If they need emotional support, then be that. And if you can't, there's a really cool hotline from Tri-County Speaks that runs 24/7. You can give them a call, and there's a trained advocate that knows how to give that kind of support if that's necessary. Because it is also a huge undertaking for another person to have to, you know, sit and hear all these horrible things about something they care about. But I think it's just super, super important for people as individuals to remember this person is coming to you with something that is probably horrific and horrible and difficult to talk about, and jumping right into the you shoulds and you coulds, and whether that be you should have dressed differently, or you shouldn't have been in that situation, or you need to go to the police, or this and this and that. Come to it with a moment of pause and a moment of support and empathy. That's what that person needs in that moment, and not you questioning everything that led to this happening.
I totally agree, Brittany. I think the big thing is you should put yourself in their shoes in that situation and think about, what would I want someone to ask me? How would I want someone to treat me if I disclose information to them? The biggest thing Ariana said is just acknowledging and letting them know that you believed everything that they said.
Mhm.
The next thing would be is to ask, oh, well, are you okay? And then, do you want to talk about it? And do you want to talk about does not mean that they may want to pour everything onto you, because you can, just like how Brittany said, you can advise them to call Tri-County Speaks, to call the hotline so they can call and talk to someone. It's just basically trying to figure out what they need in that moment when they are letting that information off to you. And that's it. It can be emotional support. It can just be someone sitting there in the room so they don't feel alone. You don't even have to talk, but you may just need someone physically there.
Yeah.
It does not.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. It really doesn't take a lot sometimes to be there for someone. People think sometimes that it's just these grand gestures and things like that. In all honesty, people just need support. People just need someone actually there. A lot of times, they really don't want to talk. They want to be alone, but not be alone. They want to be alone in their thoughts, alone in their feelings. You know, they may be going through different emotions. They need you there physically. That means you could be in the other room, sitting on the other side and everything else while they process all these things. You know, they may not want to be hugged up and everything else, but they just want to know that you support them and that you care and that you believe everything that they say. The biggest thing as well is that a lot of folks who have not had these experiences, they don't realize what it feels like, or what it feels like to have something like that taken away from them. The different range of emotions and feelings, you know, when something like that happens, you feel extremely violated. You lose a lot of those things like that privacy, you being yourself. Something was taken away from you, and you have to figure out how you're going to get that back. And so just by you being there, you just showing your support, it means a whole lot. And the biggest thing, like how Ariana said again, was just, I believe you. That can make the world of difference. Just saying, I believe you.
For me, the biggest ways that you can prevent it is change your lens. Someone telling you something can make you extremely vulnerable. Sit with the vulnerability, get uncomfortable. And when we hear about instances of crime, just like Brittany said, we're trying to rationalize it because we've always been conditioned that when something bad happens, there's a reason. There isn't always a reason. The reason is that someone made a decision that was wrong and not okay. So change your lens. Stop justifying people's behavior. Hold perpetrators accountable. Hold your friends accountable. Just because you hold the perpetrator accountable, but you're friends with people who said that it was okay, it wasn't that bad, and they're making victim blaming statements, doesn't mean that you ignore it. Hold perpetrators, hold enablers, hold everybody accountable. Hold the media accountable. If you're watching a show or you're listening to a podcast or there's a new news story and you see someone making statements that are victim blaming, saying that the victim was wearing a short dress and she was walking down the street, or the man was flirting with his teacher or boss, call that behavior out, even if it's just to your friends, if it's just to your partner or whoever you're around. Take a moment to acknowledge how wrong that was just said, and then you'll start noticing it more. And if you can, tweet the media, tweet whoever you can, write them a letter, give them a call, tell them that what they did was wrong and that it upset you, and call out that behavior. For me, those are the biggest ways that we're really going to start making a difference in getting people to acknowledge victim blaming in our everyday lives.
Yeah, I think having those conversations with the people in your life, because I mean, new stories are coming up at least once or twice a month. And I'm glad that there's more attention to it, although that can be very triggering for survivors. But I think there's a larger conversation that is still starting. I still think it's in the beginning stages in this country to happen about sexual assault, about abuse in general,
Yes.
about how we talk to victims and about victims of all of these abuses. And so it's really, really important to have these conversations, just as though we talk about race or we talk about sexism. Have these conversations with people in your life. If you see someone, you know, as Bradley mentioned, making victim blaming statements about somebody that you don't even know, or just a situation in the news or on a TV show, call it out and give it a name. So much more in naming things. Give it a name and say what you are doing is blaming the victim for what happened to them and not putting the responsibility on the person that assaulted them. Lay it out very clear, very basic. And if we're having more of these conversations on a very direct and honest level, we can make change as a culture, I believe.
And I think definitely tying into it, there are some specific phrases that I have done well, I don't think I've ever really said them, and I never really understood them a little bit as well. But the first one is boys will be boys. What does that mean? I mean, I know what boys will be and boys mean, but I don't think that that's indicative of anything. I think people are people. The behavior that they display are unique to them. I don't think that any type of, you know, behavior, attitude, actions should be labeled under, oh, that's just what such and such does. In this specific instance, I'm talking about boys or men. It's not okay. There shouldn't be, in my opinion, this separation of you know, behavior that's appropriate for men as opposed to women, as opposed to gender diverse people. Like, people are people, and you should be held accountable for your actions. So going into what Brittany and Bradley were saying, holding people accountable, calling them out. If someone tells you boys will be boys, you say, no, John Q needs to be held responsible for what John Q does. We're not going to give him the out of, oh, that's just what people do. No. What was done was wrong, and we need to call it out, and we don't need to protect this person based off of actions that we think should be okay societally or whatever. Call it out, stand up for the person that is being victimized, and don't allow, oh, this person's a good guy, or this person's a good person, I know them not to be like that, to stand in the way, because we all know and probably have had similar situations, not even related to sexual violence or violence in general, where we know somebody to be a certain way, our perspective and our vision and our light of them is amazing. But then, say for example, Brittany knows the same person and they were arrogant, aggravating, and disrespectful. Just because I see John Q that way doesn't mean that Brittany sees John Q that way. And you have to remember that. And I think that translates into intimate partner violence as well. Just because you don't know that the violence is occurring to the person, because you see the perpetrator acting a certain way, doesn't mean that it's not happening. Because every relationship is unique, every interaction is distinct, and just start by believing. That's kind of where I started. But stop saying boys will be boys. People are people, and they all should be held accountable.
Yes.
Bradley, I just want to point out that I really like what you said about taking away the why. The why should not even be a part of the conversation at all. The why is not important at all. There should be no why. And Ariana, I do agree, as well as you get a different version of each person that you meet, and people need to understand that. So yeah.
We're gonna wrap. Oh, sorry, Bradley, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It's a closing thing anyway. I'm with you. I know that we're wrapping up, but because I feel like so often when we do these videos or we do a podcast, you know, we're talking to the people, or we think that we're talking to the people who are like us, right? They have the same, you know, fire and passion to serve survivors and victims. But in case somebody's watching who maybe in the past has made victim blaming statements, or is someone who thinks, well, I don't blame victims in my life, but I don't mind commenting on a Facebook post and saying that, you know, this survivor that came forward is lying. We see you and your friends see you. And although you may not blame one of them, they see the statements that you're making and it negatively impacts them as well. So the next time that you're feeling bold and you want to post a statement, think about how maybe your best friend is going to see that and think that they deserve what happened to them when they didn't.
Correct. Or when you said you don't quote unquote support, you support the perpetrator. As in, you know, you guys may be friends or something like that, like how you were saying. And, you know, I believe what she's saying or he is saying. And then, but you still support that person, the other person, the perpetrator, if that makes sense as to what I'm saying. Because like how you said, I know them to be this way and everything else. So you still hold your support to them, but at the same time, you can't be, it can't be an in between. You can't ride the fence. You're either going to be, I support you as a victim. You can't support both. You can't support the victim and you can't support the perpetrator. Make sense? I can't get my words right today, y'all. I can't get it today. I'm trying, but words are not there. I've been pulling every which way, but I've seen it. And so I've seen it, I've experienced it, and it's a tough spot to be in when you see someone that says that they support you and, you know, they want to be there for you, but in the same light, they're also still there, or they may still associate with the perpetrator.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and I just want to round this out by saying a couple of things. I'm going to drop some shameless plugs on a few different things in this outro here. But the first thing I want to say is nobody deserves to be sexually assaulted. It doesn't matter if they were wearing something tight. It doesn't matter if they were drinking too much. Their clothes, anybody can wear clothes. If clothes are too tight, it doesn't matter because the clothes don't have to do with the act in itself. Sexual violence should be and is mutually exclusive from sexual assault. Just because I'm wearing this turtleneck outfit, Brittany's wearing her flannel and tank top, Bradley's wearing her blazer and shirt, and then Kristen has on a black top as well. Those clothes are indicative of nothing. They are what they are. They are clothes. Remember that. Tight jeans mean nothing. They mean nothing. They can't talk. Clothes can't move without help. And no one deserves to be sexually assaulted. No one's asking to be sexually assaulted. And if someone wants to blame your clothes, then they might need to rethink their own thoughts, in my opinion. And that also ties into what we call PREA, Prison Rape Elimination Act. A person is in jail, is in prison, they did something wrong. I know there's societal stigma about don't drop the soap. Throw away the soap idea, leave it alone. The person is there to serve their sentence for the crime that they committed. Sexual assault did not come along with that sentence. No. They don't deserve it. It's not right. And no one deserves to be sexually assaulted. Once again, whether they're in prison, whether they're in jail, whether they're walking down the street at night, drunk, stumbling home. No, ever.
Even if they're a perpetrator.
Exactly. Your vulnerability means nothing until someone tries to take advantage of it. Stop trying to take advantage of vulnerable people. Think about yourself. Think about yourself. Would you want this to happen to you? If you were stumbling home drunk, would you want someone to hurt you? The answer is probably no. So why would you do that to someone else?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about Denim Day later in this month for Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And, you know, this was just a short conversation. And in my opinion, like Brittany said, this is the beginning of the conversation. So if you've had these conversations with your friends, if this is the first conversation you've had or first time you started to think about that, don't let it stop here. Don't let it stop with this podcast, with this video. Continue to have those conversations because the conversations are what is going to help in sexual violence. It's going to help in this concept of rape culture and victim blaming in our country and hopefully around the world. We want this to end. We don't want people to be victimized. We want no to mean no, and anything but yes means no. And I mean, I could say it's as simple as that, but there's so many nuances and little pieces that people try to throw in. But the point is, believe people. Don't make excuses for the person or make excuses for what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And don't stop talking about it. If you see something, you know, say something, as they say. And if something doesn't feel right, call it out. Even if it's your grandma, tell her she's wrong, because I'll do it too.
There you go. There you go.
I want to thank everybody that's here with me today. I look forward to hopefully speaking with you in other videos coming up. And thank you so much for your time. And listeners, we'll be sure to link down our website, follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook. We also have a Twitter, and just continue to have those conversations.